Good evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today is my Unscripted and Unchained first look at the rules of the game of Worlds Without Number. So, if you watched the last video, you know that I just started taking a look at this game, and my first introduction to the system. I'm assuming that it's very similar to the system of Stars Without Number, although I haven't seen that game yet either. But that's certainly in my sights as maybe one of my next major purchases while it's out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the rules section of this game and then pretty much end it there before going on into the next components. And as you can see, I am pretty prepared to do quite a few more videos on this game system, because that's how jam-packed this one volume is. It's about 390 some odd pages long of content, and there are just so many systems in here. Most of them dedicated, a portion of this book is dedicated to world building, which was something that my one of my subscribers had asked me to focus on, and I certainly will. But that's not for today. Today we're going to take a look at the actual game system, and here we go. So, the rules of the game. Every hero must encounter situations in which the outcome is not a given. Whether putting steel to the lapdogs of some corrupt noble or leaping among the rooftops of an ancient city slums, they will often attempt deeds that may not be successful as they would wish. A GM needs fair and consistent systems by which to judge these efforts and to give the players the right rewards for their daring. This chapter contains the rules for Worlds Without Number. With the characters made in the prior chapter, and I covered that in a prior video, GM should be able to adjudicate the great majority of challenges and daring exertions undertaken by the heroes. So the basics of the system, I'm not going to go into super detail. I'm not going to read every word here because if you're familiar with RPGs, you kind of know what these things are. It's just talking about the categories of the basic system. So there are skill checks, and skill checks are usually devised by you have a particular level of skill in something, and then there's a task that you're asking the GM or informing the GM that you are going to attempt, and the GM will then assign a difficulty level, a number in which you have to exceed in your role, or if it's in reverse order, there's a difficulty level, in which case you have to roll below in order to be successful. So, and that's often called the target number. So you'll have a target number or a challenge number or a difficulty number, and then you'll have the actual roll with your modifiers to check to see if you've made it. There are saving throws. So saving throws are usually a response to something that has happened, and almost always it's a negative something that is happening towards the character, and so the character will roll to see if they either avoid the hazard, take a minimal damage from the hazard, or they fail and they're completely affected by the hazard. So saving throws are things such as dodging from getting hit, or save versus poisons or spells, or a dexterity save to prevent yourself from falling into a pit, and so on. So there are saving throws. And then there is combat. And as many of you are probably aware, Basically, what you're doing is you're rolling and trying to hit the armor class, or hit beyond the defensive abilities of whomever you're attacking, and you have the same benefits as well. All right, so again, it's very similar to the skill check, where now you're trying to roll either above or below a certain number in order to hit your target. And we come up over here. So using the system in play, we'll be willing to translate actions into roles. There is a certain breed of player. I kind of like the approach that they have here, the writer has, towards directing these comments at a particular type of player. And, some of this might be tongue-in-cheek. Other parts of it might actually be abrasive to some. But when I first read this, I was like, wow, that's a pretty direct way of kind of stamping down on this certain breed of player. So there is a certain breed of player who is fun to play with, engaged in the game, and a credit to the group, but quite unable to master specific rules. They may just not be very good at it, and they may have so little time outside of the game that they really can't afford to spend it studying the rule books. For players like these, just let them say what they're trying to do and then tell them what they need to roll. If they say they're swinging their axe at a bandit, just tell them to roll a d20. If they hit, and then tell them what damage die to roll. The player may or may not pick up on these rules eventually, but you'll keep these things moving along quickly. The GM decides what is rolled. The players always decide what their hero is trying to do, but the GM decides what they roll for it, if any roll is possible or needed at all. A PC with a convince of -4 skill may be great at persuading others of things, but they can't just decide that they're going to talk a duke into handing over the border keep and then reach for their dice to roll the skill check. The GM is the one who decides if a particular action is plausible. So no matter how great their skill might be, and this persuasion skill that this player character has, doesn't mean that the GM has to allow the roll to take place. The GM could just say, you know what, it's just not a possible thing to happen or plausible thing to happen, and so you don't even get a chance to roll for it. It's not going to happen. All right, so GM makes the rules. The GM makes the rules. While this chapter has many rules in it, not all of them will be right for every game table. Groups will dislike certain rules and forget others, and reinterpret a few more. Just because a rule is in the book does not mean it has to exist at your table. The GM and the group know best for what kind of game they want to have, and if they think a different rule ought to be used, then they're probably right. Ultimately, the GM's decision about what rule best suits the campaign and group they're working with are final, and no contradiction in this book can make them wrong. All right, so this is essentially Rule 0. And I've had people argue that Rule 0 doesn't exist just because it is not labeled Rule 0. But right here you have Rule 0. The GM ultimately decides what is in the game, what is not in the game. Lastly, hold these rules lightly. If you can't remember a rule mid-game, then make a call that sounds reasonable and keep going. Spending 5 minutes digging through the chapter for an edge case rule isn't as good as taking 10 seconds to make a judgment and call the playing on it. There will be time to look afterwards for the printed rule to help you. The quick reference sheet on page 59 is formatted to be printed. And we'll take a look at that page as we go through this. So that's the basic rule sets that you're dealing with here, and it is just a very brief description of how the rules actually work and who decides those. Some great graphics in this book. Scenes, turns, and durations. So scenes, and I'm starting to see this more and more often now, is the description of, a scene. As an old school gamer, I was just used to turns and combat rounds. Now I've seen this term scene, which is in basic measurement for most effective durations. A scene is simply one general event or activity. A single fight is a scene. Infiltrating a smuggler's warehouse is a scene. Negotiating with a merchant prince is a scene, and so on. Scenes can last up to about 15 minutes of gameplay, so that's what they're, basically, if they want to call it that. Most scenes last no longer than 15 minutes or so, though some stretch is possible at the GM's discretion. So these are like kind of like events that have been placed within a single context, potentially like a single theme, and the GM has constructed it that where something unique to that scene needs to be accomplished. Sometimes it's important to track the time for more complex operations, like exploring the deep or navigating the trackless depths of an ancient ruin. In such cases, the turn is the common measure of time. Each turn lasts 10 minutes and is the equivalent of one scene for those situations when it matters. Okay. And so forth. So you can see that it is broken down into scenes, turns, and durations. I don't see the description of durations here. Durations is a segment of time of something that is a timed action. So like if you cast a spell and the spell has a duration to it, and the duration will fall within, it might stretch across several turns, or even a duration could last through the entire scene. It depends on what you're talking about. Saving throws. There are just a variety of saving throws. I'm not going to go into huge detail here. You have evasion saves, you have mental saves, you have physical saves, and you have luck saves. All right, and just basically knowing your the activities that you may or may not get a saving throw is good to know somewhat in advance. Skill checks, we go into skill checks. So let's see the actual rule here. To make a skill check, roll 2d6 and add the most relevant skill level and attribute modifier. If the total is equal or higher than the check's difficulty, the check is a success. On a failure, the PC either can't accomplish the feat at all, or they achieve it at the cost of some further complication to the situation. The GM determines the specific outcome of a failure. If the character doesn't even have level 0 in a pertinent skill, they suffer a -1 penalty to the roll. In the case of particularly technical or esoteric skills, they might not even be able to attempt the skill check at all. Some checks might be suitable for more than one skill. A javelin throwing contest might use exert for being an athletic contest, or shoot for involving a ranged weapon, or stab for using a muscle-powered thrown weapon. In such a case, the PC can use the best applicable skill. In other situations, a skill might seem peripherally relevant. Trying to find the damaged component in an ancient magical engine before it explodes could certainly be magic, but the GM might also let notice or craft be applied as a skilled craftsman or sharp-eyed observer might be able to recognize signs of damage. All right, so basically, and then there are skill check difficulties. 6 is relatively simple tasks, so if you have to beat a 6, you're going to roll 2d6, I'm sorry, 2d6, add any modifiers, usually positives to it, including skill levels for that particular thing, and so you're trying to beat a 6. An 8 is a little bit more difficult, so it's a significant challenge to complete, and so an 8 is the score that you would have to beat. 10 is something too difficult to be expected of anyone but a skilled expert, and even they might fail. A 12 is a truly master. 14 plus, only true masters has any chance of achieving this at all, and even they will probably fail. All right, so you don't have very many tasks. So when a character, or when a player says that their character is going to attempt to do something, this is where the GM comes in and thinks about, well, what are they saying, what applies, and what skill check difficulty do I think that this lock might be set at. It might be a very high quality lock, and so it might have a 10 difficulty check in order to pick that lock. Combat. So combat has rounds, initiative, and surprise. All right, so the round, we have already described this. The combat round is 6 seconds in length. During a round, every participant gets to take a turn, after which a new round begins. The order of action is determined by initiative. To determine initiative, each side rolls a d8 and adds the highest dexterity modifier in the group. All right, so uses group initiative. Your actions in combat, you have main actions, you have move actions, you have on-turn actions. Let's see what this means. On-turn. On-turn actions are quick, simple acts that take very little time and focus to perform, such as falling prone, saying a few words, a skilled archer reloading a bow from a ready quiver, drawing out a readied object, or similar things. All right, and then instant actions are so fast and simple that the participant can use them at any time, even when it is not their turn. Let's see if they have an example here. Mentioning like a luck class ability or certain magic arts or instant actions. When so attacking a foe. When a combatant wants to harm an enemy, they need to make a hit roll. An attack usually counts as a main action, and the assailant must be close enough to actually hit. To make a hit roll, the attacker rolls a d20 and adds their relevant combat skill, their attack bonus, and their relevant attribute modifier. If they lack even level 0 skill in the weapon being used, they suffer a -2 penalty. Any other situational modifiers or penalties are also added to the roll. If the total is equal to or greater than the target's armor class, then the attack hits and the damage is rolled. If less, then the attack misses. A missed melee attack may still inflict shock damage if the weapon has a shock rating and the target's armor class is equal or lower than it. To roll damage, they go into rolling damage and such. So that shock damage is something I kind of mentioned in the last video that I did, where I was talking about, well, even if you just hit the armor, but you haven't done enough to actually damage the person, you could still have an effect caused by that very solid, hit. And so this seems to kind of cover that idea as well. So various hit roll modifiers, shock damage, they go into shock damage. Shock for a weapon is listed as points of damage and the maximum AC affected. Thus, a shock of 215 means 2 points of damage are done to any target with an AC of 15 or less. More heavily armored targets are immune to the weapon's shock. There's dual weapon wielding, shoving and grappling, execution attacks. A target that is completely unaware of danger is vulnerable to a quick and bloody death, no matter how great the martial prowess or how thick their armor. The execution attack gives an assailant an opportunity to slay a foe with a single well-placed arrow or blade. A warrior can use their veteran's luck ability with this skill check, but only if it allows a reroll on a failed check rather than forcing an automatic hit. Okay. And then they give you common attack actions. So making an attack roll, make a ranged attack. Those are main actions. An instant action, make a snap attack. A combatant with a ready weapon can rush their attack, sacrificing accuracy for speed. The combatant must still have a main action impending or available as an instant. They can sacrifice it to make a melee or ranged attack against the foe, whether a snapshot with a bow or a quick thrust at an adjacent melee foe. Making a swarm attack is a main action. Casting a spell, main action. Charge is a special. Shatter a shield is a main action. So you can actually just focus on removing the shield of an opponent. Screening an ally is a move action. And remember, you'll get a main action, a move action, and an instant action every round. So you do get quite a few things going on during that 6-second round. Total defense is an instant action. Running is a move, obviously. Making a fighting withdrawal. All right, so basically a controlled retreat is a main action, and so on. So they list a number of different types of actions. Oh, on turn. Let's see, on turn actions. Let's take a look at one of these. So going prone, you can do that almost instantly. Delaying on action simply chooses to delay the remainder of their actions this turn and after a particular other participant has acted. All right. I'm not going to read through the combat there. Injury, healing, and system strain. So mortal wounds and stabilizing. Let's see. Let's see if I could decipher at which point your character is nearly dead. A creature reduced to 0 hit points is dead or dying. Ordinary NPCs or unremarkable creatures will generally die on the spot. PCs and those NPCs important enough to have deserved the name will be mortally wounded. Okay. Once stabilized, the target recovers with 1 hit point after 10 minutes of rest and can rise uh, uh, and act normally thereafter. They count as frail, however, and will remain frail until they have had at least a week of bed rest. Frail PCs cannot heal damage through natural healing and will die immediately if brought to zero again. A physician can try to remove the frail condition when an hour's work, with an hour's work and skill check against difficulty 10, so pretty high difficulty, they can only get one chance to remove a given frailty. A wounded creature recovers its level or hit dice in lost hit points after every night's rest, assuming they are properly fed and can get decent sleep. At this time, they also lose 1 point of accumulated system strain. Creatures that are frail do not recover hit points this way, nor do they lose system strain. Magical healing. Some healers have access to the abilities that automatically heal hit points, such as a healer's arcane arts or the vitality transmitting spells of a necromancer. Other PCs might have elixirs of health, artifacts that cure injuries, or other magical means. A drowned hero at 0 hit points who gets 3 points of healing from magical potion, for example, can immediately get up and on their next turn and return to fray without any frailty. There is first aid, system strain. So let's see. Most forms of healing and certain other magical powers add to a target's system strain. System strain is a measure of how much stress the target's body is under and how profoundly it may have been taxed by magical energies, hunger, privation, and forced healing acceleration. A character's maximum system strain is equal to their constitution attribute. Thus, someone with a constitution of 13 could accumulate up to 13 points of system strain. This strain is usually lost at a rate of 1 point for every night of good, refreshing sleep. Healing often adds to a target's system strain, whether as first aid or the effect of some magical power. If the target is already at its maximum system strain, it can handle any more stress, gets no benefit from the effects or attempts of healing. So it seems that it basically caps your healing from a, let's say, a healing spell or potion at your constitution of, let's say, 13 in this example. So it will kind of not make sense to try to do too much healing if you only lost a couple of points, 1, 2 points. Then it might not make sense to waste a healing elixir on you rather than let you just naturally heal those 2 points up anyway. Poisons and disease, falling and other hazards. They talk about the penalties. Powerful poisons might have a -4. Weak toxins might have a +4 and such, and you make your saving throws. D6 per 10 feet feet of fall, up to a maximum of 20 D6. Suffocation, poison. Get into overland travel. I'm not going to spend too much time going with overland travel. We have wilderness exploration and expeditions. Let's get to that page 59. Starving, foraging. So they're going into actually traveling around and doing actual thing like site exploration and such. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. And this is gaining experience points. So this is in a different section. I wasn't going to combine this up here. I just want to jump to page 59 and basically show you the cheat sheet. We'll go back and look at those other things, but here is your quick reference, and I will shrink this down a little bit. So, skill checks, saving throws, injuries and healing, spell casting, combat rounds, hitting and damage, morale checks. I didn't talk at all about any of these other items. I didn't talk about spell casting, which I will when I go over the magic and the arcane traditions, which will be the next video. Morale checks. Morale check is rolled at 2d6. If it's higher than the target's morale score, they rout, retreat, or surrender. PCs never check morale. NPCs do when an ally first is downed, when half of them are down, or when shaken by some great reverse or terrifying foe. Even on a successful morale check, NPCs will not continue to fight when it's obviously futile or not worth the risk. All right, I kind of like that morale rule because I let the players decide what the morale of their PCs are, and I usually wait until something significant happens before their opposition have to make morale checks as well. So there you go. That's a pretty quick first look at the rules of the game. Basically, a series of checks are being made against a target number. That target number might be the armor class. In the case of a to-hit roll, must be that armor class or below, and then or above, I should say, and then the other skill checks are just based on a difficulty setting, and you have your combat round and the various types of actions that you have in the combat round, and so forth. So pretty straightforward system. A little bit less forgiving than some other modern RPGs out there. And then this is a fairly modern RPG, so its contemporaries are, in some cases more forgiving than what this system seems. Certainly, healing is much slower in this system, so this game is not as forgiving for for bad events taking place. So I really like that aspect as well. In closing, I'm going to say I'm really enjoying the read through of this book and learning the game system as I go through it, and it certainly has made me start to wonder how I missed the first one. So stars without number. I have been told and I've heard numerous times that it's probably one of the best sci-fi game systems out there, and so I'm certainly looking to pick up the equivalent copy, and I'm sure it's probably something like this too, a very huge volume, and it's certainly a great use of shelf space that is ever shrinking for me here. So a great use of shelf space, so I'm looking forward to that as well. So once again, thank you for joining. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. As I stated, this video was a response to a comment on my channel asking, well, when you're going to get back to covering Worlds Without Number, and so that's why I told the individual, yes, it is next in my queue. I will get to it, and although I didn't cover the world building aspects just yet because there was just so much other content before that part of the book that is in there, and so I wanted to make sure I focused on that first. So in a few more days I will get around to I'll talk about the magic system, which looks like it's coming up next, and I will absolutely spend time with the world building aspects of this game system. So once again, thanks for joining. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe out there. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You'll have a great rest of your night. Take care.